Thank you so much, Mary, for that very informative and thorough presentation. That was a lot of really great information. Definitely gives me a new perspective on this issue. So we're going to begin the Q&A just for the audience sake, so they know how we work. We don't take questions directly from the chat. What we do is we ask you to raise your hand in Zoom. In order to do so, you need to go to the second from the right button called Reactions at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then you click on Raise Your Hand. When I call on you, I'll just ask you where you're from and just state your question, and we just ask that your questions are brief and on topic. And with that, I'm going to ask the first question. Sure. Is there any political will to make these changes happen?
Yes, there is. That's why we had Right to Try, for example. It started as a state-by-state action, and then it really got its teeth when Trump said that he would be happy to sign a Right to Try bill. So that was great. What he thought he was signing, of course, was something that really was going to open up choice to everyone. And because of the way the FDA works with the pharmaceutical companies and can choose winners and losers, obviously that hasn't happened the way that we imagined it would. The thing is, I think the people here may be some of the most likely to get excited about another approach, because if you're taking supplements or into the preventative movement in any way, and I know a lot of your listeners are, you already know that the FDA is not your friend in terms of helping you get the best health. And now you know how it got its teeth. Now you know how it's warped the pharmaceutical industry, which actually can be quite helpful when it's competitive. And I think the people here may want to help in that movement. I certainly hope so. And I think connecting with the life extension people is one really good way to kind of get in the movement. They often send out like letters to your congressman and things like that, as many others in the movement do. So yes, there's definitely a push to it. The thing is, most people don't understand the mechanics of this, and that's why I'm talking to you today. Because if we don't understand that, we can't fix it.
Great, thank you. And with the Right to Try, so I understand that would make it easier for companies to bring about, and scientists to bring about new drugs to the market. How would we ensure safety, even using marketplace mechanics? Would we be able, if someone put a new drug out there under Right to Try, and it kills a bunch of people, could those people be sued? Could they go to jail? Like what mechanisms would there be to ensure safety?
Okay, so in Right to Try is a little different. Right to Try, you actually understand that you're taking the drug at your own risk. It hasn't been FDA approved. What are the limits of that? Well, the limits are probably fraud. In other words, if you take a drug and the company knows that it's got a 50% chance of killing you, well, of course, it wouldn't give it to you, but let's just give kind of an example we can hang our hat on. So, and you find out that they knew that 50% of the people who took it would die, then you could sue them. But if they've told you everything they know about the drug, giving you informed consent, basically, then obviously, and you say, okay, I still want to take it, then that's up to you. The problem, though, isn't that, because the company's not going to give you the drug if they don't have some feel that it's pretty safe for you. But what they do is most people who want to take Right to Try are terminal. Mm. What happens is if the drug doesn't work, they're going to die. The company already knows that if they die on the drug, the FDA may turn around and say, oh, well, it might have been your drug, so now you have to do all these extra studies, And so this is one of the reasons the companies don't want to do it. The reason I know this is we had a situation, several actually, at Upjohn, where people wanted compassionate use. And the first part of that is we have to agree. Whether the FDA agrees is a whole other situation. And these are the kind of discussions we had. Do we want to risk a drug that may save lots of lives and get it delayed because we give it to one person who's going to maybe die, but not because of our drug?
Okay, thank you. And in your book, you've got a chapter called "Expensive Drugs Are Now Replacing Affordable," or you say that expensive drugs are now replacing affordable natural products. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, that was that one slide, where I talked about the fish oil, for example. And there's actually the folic acid, of course, is still cheap, which is good. But the really good drugs are being turned into, well, actually, there's several nutrients, I should say. For example, NAC, they tried to ban that during COVID. It was actually, and part of the rationale was that that some drug company was working on it. And that's another little twist that I didn't get a chance to talk about. But if a drug company is working on either that compound or more likely an analog of it, which means they put an extra chemical group on it that might come off when you take it, then the FDA says that it's a drug, so you, the consumer, can no longer buy it over the counter. And they're starting to do that to a bunch of drugs, a bunch of nutrients, or they're trying to. And so what'll happen if that continues is that the companies will turn these nutrients into expensive products, just like they did with fish oil.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's not well known. I'm trying to remember the name of the association that watches this most closely. It's the abbreviation is the ANH. National Health. It'll come to me. I'll think of it and send it to you. Then you can post it.
I'm sure you'll think of it as soon as this is over. Yes. So we've got a couple of hands out there. So let me go ahead and call on a couple of our audience people. Stephen, where are you from, and what's your question?
I am in Iowa, and really appreciate this presentation. It lifted the veil of some things. Not sure I wanted to know all that was behind it, but it makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate, Michael, your first question about the political will, and I want to follow that up. I mean, are there leading advocates in Congress or among presidential candidates for whom this is an actual issue?
Well, that's a good question. My guess is that the closest person that I am aware of would probably be Rand Paul. And that's partly because his father, Ron Paul, endorsed the book. So I know Ron Paul. I have met Rand, but he probably doesn't remember me. So I guess he would probably realize that. Frankly, I think if this came up in Congress, if somebody would just start talking about it, there would be a lot of buy-in. And there would also be a lot of pushback. I have written several articles and made several presentations before I wrote this book. I actually presented the FDA. The higher ups are really pretty much aware that, okay, this was back in the 90s, and this is an important thing because things change. So back in the 90s, the people that were in the FDA, they were well aware that delays kill people. But of course, their neck was on the line, their job was on the line. So that really deterred them from changing things. There was one guy in there who was doing cancer patients, making cancer drugs really hard to get approvals. Then his wife got cancer, and he found out how hard it was to even get her in a clinical trial, and he changed his whole way of doing things. But the system is so entrenched. This is why I think you really have to get rid of the agency. The system is so entrenched. Even when he wanted to push drugs through quickly in his section, and he was like the head of his section, he was only able to save a year. The whole system is screwed up. I mean, the whole agency, there's no way to fix it, I don't think. I think you really have to get rid of it.
And to follow up on that, given that the pharmaceutical industries are so incredibly profitable, the ones that now exist, obviously all the small ones are gone based on what you were saying. What is the likelihood that that this would be able to get passed, given the power and the influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the legislature and on the FDA?
Yeah, they aren't going to want this, but it's going to have to be the people who stand up. And actually, there were times in the 80s where FDA tried to regulate nutrients just like drugs, and they got the most pushback. Congress got the most pushback from the public than they ever had gotten, both times. This is what we need to do. I mean, we're going to have to be the people who push it. Yes, we can get Congress people to help and support us, but the reality is the only way this is going to happen is through the people, I fear, because there's more of us than there is of them.
Okay, let me go to our next audience question. Steve, where you from?
Hi, Steve from New York. This seems to be across the board. The agricultural regulators protect industry. The banks are failing because they were unregulated, and in Europe, the regulatory agencies protect the people, and in this country, the regulatory agencies seem to protect the industries that they're under the guise of protecting the public, and that seems to be capitalism at its worst.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
How do we fix this?
Okay, it's a great question. I actually can answer it, Steve. Yeah, it's not really capitalism, because what's happening now is the government is taking the taxpayer money to bail out the banks oftentimes. Now, what happened I have another book, Healing Our World, which I wrote before this one. It answers political questions like that. And one of the things it talks about is the Scottish free banking system. They didn't have many regulations there in Scotland, but this was towards the mid to late 1800s. And what they did is, if the bank went bankrupt, the owners were liable. And this is what normally has happened in many countries, not just in banking, but for other things. It used to be the owners were liable. But what we've done is the government has taken its sovereign immunity cloak and given it in part to corporations. When you incorporate so that if you harm somebody, you are only liable due to the amount of assets you have in the corporation. The owners are not liable. So the owners don't pay really good attention to liability issues, except to the extent that they want, their stock to go up. So if harming people will make money and they can get away with it, then they're fine with that. And see, the banks in Scotland didn't do that. If the banks went bankrupt, the owners were liable. And if the owners couldn't pay, the other banks said, oh, this is going to be bad for our publicity. No one's going to want to put money in banks if, you can lose your money. So what they did is they actually made good on those deposits that the owners could not, to keep the industry solvent. And so that's the way it should work in a true free market or capitalistic system, is that, of course, you have to be responsible for what you do. And if you lose the monies that you promised that your depositors would be there when they needed it, then you have to pay up. And so that's really the way it should work. We should not have this protection for the corporations, in my opinion. The whole stock market thing is set up in a way that the government can manipulate it at will, through the Federal Reserve, which those kind of two work together. So the Federal Reserve can, or if the government wants to spend more, it can inflate the currency, which it's been doing. I mean, in fact, inflation has been so entrenched that we think it's natural. It's not. It's not. It should actually go the opposite way. Our dollar should buy more tomorrow than it does today. It buys less. I hope that helped.
Great. Thank you. And so now in your book, you talk about the FDA rating stores and physicians for promoting prevention. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Dr. Jonathan Wright, who's not only my colleague, but one of my doctors, who endorsed death by regulation, had his offices raided at gunpoint. And because the FDA was presuming that he had adulterated drugs. They went into his trash can and found that there were some vials of drugs that, had, I don't know, discoloration, growth, something in them that they didn't like. That's why they were in the trash can. So he tried for a long time. They took all the records. They actually even held the patients at gunpoint. And they took all the records, and it took him years to get those records back. And then he had to pay to have them copied by the FDA. It's really atrocious. And life extension, same kind of thing. They rated their, I guess it was their offices, and took, all their computers. They took all their records, and they told the founders that they were going to see them jailed for life. Their lawyer said, "Yeah, you can't win against the FDA. You better just make a deal." And of course, they said, "No way." And they got on programs. It was radio programs at the time. The internet wasn't around much. So they got on the radio, and they talked about the nutrients, and they talked about the things that the FDA was doing to them. Really bad publicity for the FDA. And the FDA kept lowering their offer. Okay, instead of 20 counts, we'll only have 7 counts. Nope, they wouldn't take anything. They kept at them. Finally, the FDA had to dismiss all the charges, and in addition, they stopped the raids, I think, because of this. I can't be sure, but the raids did stop once the life extension people prevailed. So that was a real win for us, us meaning the public, because they raided health food stores as well while people were shopping. I mean, this was really bad. They were trying to discourage people from taking nutrients. And again, a lot of your people know that longevity is based on having a high level of nutrients, and not eating junk food, and not taking the minimum daily requirements of vitamins. We need much more than that. The FDA simply won't admit it.
So speaking about the dietary stuff. So you also in your book talk about how new dietary ingredient regulations are thwarting prevention. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yes, that's when I was talking about the fact that if the drug company is trying to make a drug out of a nutrient, either directly of the exact nutrient or a modification of it, the FDA claims that makes it a drug, and it cannot be sold over the counter anymore. Okay.
And we've got about 2 to 3 more minutes left. So I just want to ask you, with the 3 minutes in mind. So with your expertise in healthcare policy, what do you see as the most pressing issue? I mean, I'm assuming that this is definitely up there, if not the most pressing issue to you. And how can we ensure that all individuals have access to high quality, affordable care?
Well, are you meaning just nutrient and pharmaceutical care, or the whole global healthcare thing?
Well, let's go wide. Well, for 3, but now we've got 2 minutes. So wherever you can get in 2 minutes, if you can hit the globe in 2 minutes, I'll give it to you.
Okay, let me tell you this. What I've talked about today is happening in healthcare in general. It's not just the pharmaceutical industry. The government has gotten so involved in healthcare as well. I want to let you guys know that. It pays about 50% of all the healthcare costs in the US. We do not have a free market in healthcare. I mean, the government's always pointing, the marketplace failed. If you really look at it carefully, like I have, it's not. It's the other way around. I even remember, I'm old enough to remember a time when people did not get health insurance. They didn't need it. They could pay for it themselves. It was affordable. But that changed with Medicare and Medicaid. And Medicare got accepted by the doctors because they paid so well. Now they pay so little, so it's they got kind of trapped. So that I want to pass that on to you, because that's an important thing for everyone to know. We do not have a free market in healthcare, and that's what's being blamed for this whole situation. And as long as we have this fallacy about what's happening, we can't fix it.
Okay. I hear a lot, we've got 1 more minute left. I think a lot of people out there, as opposed to blaming the free market, blame corruption. Is that, what are your thoughts on the role of corruption, and also coming from the corporations? Because it's hard to see, especially with the revolving door, which you hit on in your presentation, where one ends and where another begins. So you talk about the FDA and the government, but these are the same people who are in the corporations, and that's capitalism, right? Or free market, right? In theory. How do you even begin to know as an FDA? And now you've got 30 seconds.
Well, corruption. Okay, so if most other countries have a saying, where there's regulation, there's corruption. We don't have it, but they call it the bite. And what they mean by that is it's a bribe. And as we saw, the FDA got right into the bribing business right after these amendments. This is what happens. People have the idea that government's there to protect them. I have bad news. It's not. It's run by the people who have more power and money than you do. That's the truth of it. And as long as we have government, and government can do things private citizens cannot, we're going to have corruption. That's the definition of corruption.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to end it there. Thank you so much, Mary, for this very enlightening conversation. It just adds on to all of the other stuff that we've learned as far as how things work. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. If we can unmute the audience, please. Do I have my my team unmuted?
Thank you, Mary.
Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.